In the most recent rounds of WikiLeaks released emails from John Podesta, we've got two fresh examples of coordination between members of the media from two different sources with Clinton campaign staff. In the first, we have references to a story that was about to be published by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman and multiple members of Hillary Clinton's staff, which apparently had quite a bit of access to what that story was going to be before it was even published. So let's bring up this first graphic, and you're going to see an email. This is from Palmier, is one of the members of Clinton campaign staff, saying, Madam Secretary at all, which I don't like that expression, by the way. I wanted to give you an update on a pending story on costs of policy proposals. There you see the multiple references to lots of people having access to it, including Neera Tanden. Fought hard on it, wanted to make sure that they knew that if it was unfair, it would be a setback to their relationship. Maggie thinks it is responsible, and that's the person writing the article, and that we are not going to have a problem with it. Well, that's nice of her. It will have all the caveats that Hillary has not actually proposed these policies and have said that we will pay for any new policies, and she's going to read me the story later today off the record to further assure me. So, now the question becomes, is this the normal sort of confirmation of quotes and sources that reporters usually do, or does it go beyond that? I don't know that there's much conversation to be had there, but maybe.
So Jennifer Palmieri is very senior. She's the head of communications, basically, for the Hillary campaign. Yeah. And so this is not, quote unquote, normal, except, unfortunately, I think it is. So it's not supposed to be.
It's not what it's normally supposed to be.
That's right. So journalists are not supposed to run their story in its entirety by their sources. In fact, as you'll see in the next story, we have the journalist saying, I guess I'm going to be called a hack for this. Shh, don't let anybody know. But in reality, I think with these power brokers, in order to gain access, they do this on a fairly regular basis. So now, did we suspect that? Yes, and we talked about that on this show. In fact, that's why I decipher the stories for you guys. That's why we break it down and go, now here's what they really meant. Yeah. Because we know that some of it gets watered down because they have to go back to the powerful people and go, now don't worry, I softened it up for you, and you know, and
they treat them like wild horses. Don't want to spook them.
Yeah, exactly. And so now, but when we say that, a lot of times everybody gets like offended, like, oh, are you saying that we're running our stories by them? Yeah, that's what I was saying, and it turns out we were totally right. Yeah. So look, it's not earth-shattering in the sense that we suspected it was happening, right? But it is important to know. So now you know that is the relationship. And by the way, let's be fair. It's not like they're not writing the story. Yeah. They're writing that story that the Hillary campaign is not happy about. But they've got to soften it with cushions and pillows.
Yeah, if they didn't have to worry about this relationship, it theoretically would be a different article, an article that we now no longer have access to. It never actually existed because of these sorts of relationships. By the way, Jesus, I messed up with the graphic order. So if you could jump to graphic 6. The New York Times did put out a comment about this. In this case, our reporter fact-checked key points of the story with our sources, which is standard journalistic practice. At no time was the full story shared with a source in advance. Now, so that's what the New York Times is saying. Now, from the Clinton campaign staff there, it sounds like the entire story was going to be shared. Now, we don't know for sure that that actually happened. That's one of the problems with just little bits and pieces of these emails being taken fairly out of context. But it seems like that's what they expect. They weren't like, oh my God, she's going to share the whole thing. They were like, yeah, she's going to share the whole thing, which implies that there are probably many other instances of this.
Yeah. So, look, again, I want to be clear here. If somebody says, I'm going to run your quotes by you, that's not bad. That's actually fairly good journalism.
It's responsible.
Yeah, because I had a conversation with you. It was over the phone, whatever it was, or I took notes on it. I want to make sure these are the things you actually said. Nothing wrong with that at all, okay? But if you say, okay, now here's the whole story, and so one of the implications of that, consequences of that, is that then you can get ready to rebut it. You can get ready to counter it. You could have your defenses laid out. Well, that's not, I mean, are they giving everybody that same courtesy?
I doubt it.
Did the Washington Post, when they ran 16 negative stories in 16 hours on Bernie Sanders, did they read all 16 stories to Bernie Sanders and say, now, are you, okay, I want to make sure you're prepared for this, and so let me read you the whole story ahead of time, and let me make doubly sure that, you know, that I've cushioned the blow for you? No, they do this with the really powerful people. Yeah. I'm going to give them one more, not break, but just a further explanation, which is that, well, if they didn't suck up to their sources like that, sometimes they wouldn't have stories because some of that is coming from their other sources. Yeah. So I understand that. But look, no matter what, there's got to be a little bit of honesty in how we do this process. So nobody was ever honest about this. It's not like the New York Times politicos, et cetera, of the world raised their hand and said, oh, yeah.
Oh, by the way.
By the way, I mean, from time to time, we just read the whole story to them and let them have access to it, let them, pick it apart and get ready for it, et cetera. So it's a little bit, now they're going to get mad when I make this comparison, but it's a little bit like Fox News is Fair and Balanced. Not so much. Not so much. The problem isn't that Fox News is conservative. The problem is the mislabeling.
Yeah. Well, look, change starts at home. As you said, people should admit to it. So I should, full disclosure, on Think Tank, when I do a story about Emma Watson, I reach out to her. She's never responded, but one of these days. But anyway. Okay, so we have another example. As I said, this time with Glenn Thrush of Politico. This is perhaps my favorite couple of sentences from any of these released emails. If you could bring this up. No worries, because I have become a hack, I will send you the whole section that pertains to you, spelled with just a U. This is not a tweet, this is an email. Please don't share or tell anyone I did this. Tell me if I fucked up anything. Well, you just did. But no, this is an authentic, this is one of the authentic. This isn't one of the ones that's just being shared by a right-winger that never actually appeared on WikiLeaks. That's real. Doesn't seem like something anyone would seriously write. That seems like a joke, but apparently it's not a joke. So
this goes to my ambivalence about these leaked emails. I feel a little bad reading through people's private emails. Some should argue that I should feel really bad, that we shouldn't do that, right? Some will argue, no, it's about politics. No,
well, we're gonna get into that with the Larry last
I know. So there's a lot of debate about that, and we'll have that in another context. But in this case, what we learn from it is important. And it is more than any particular story, it is the chumminess. That's why you're seeing the U spelled with just a U. That's why you're seeing the informal, because Glenn Thrush and John Podesta are friends, okay? And
or at least are very comfortable with each other.
That's exactly
in their relationship.
That's exactly. And so it's in some ways, I don't want necessarily them to have knives on one another, but at the same time, the press is supposed to be watchdogs of the government and the powerful. So when you get to that level of chumminess, well, then you read the whole thing to him that pertains to him, and he gets to nitpick it and craft it and refine it, and that's how these relationships go. And it's problematic because then you're not getting the full truth. You're getting a truth massaged by the powerful.
And like you said earlier, like we know that they get sources, and maybe they get low-level sources, and they'll give them a little bit of protection to try to get information about people up higher. But when it's the head of the campaign, what higher person are you trying to get info about? At that point, that's as high as it goes. That's exactly who you shouldn't.
So do you see what I'm saying? Like, hey, I'm going to give you this.
Exactly, but
so
I'm saying,
remember, next time you leak a story, leak it to me on a different topic.
Yeah, and then again, that's a version of the truth that will be leaked. That we can't. Now, again, look, I've gotten criticism for saying that the vast majority of all this stuff that's been leaked, the part that's even remotely interesting, tends to be just confirmation of stuff anyone who's been paying attention to politics for more than a few months already knows anyway. And these are examples of things that we've been talking about for years. It's one of the driving philosophies of this network is to not do this sort of thing, to not operate in that way. But of course, it is great to have actual examples of it. It's not earth-shattering because we know that this is what's going on. It's going on with John Podesta. We don't have the emails from Hillary Clinton specifically, but we know that that stuff is going on with people like Hillary Clinton as well. And that's common. Now, there are some in the media who have higher standards and don't engage in this sort of thing, but it's nice to, every once in a while, get a little bit of a view into who has not risen to that level. But I do want to read just a couple of these quick tweets because Glenn Thrush, the guy who's referenced from Politico in that last email, is he's not apologizing for his involvement in that. He says, a little unnerving but fascinating to be in the middle of a ginned-up, self-serving shitstorm pushed by fake, in-the-bag partisan media, which I guess now includes us.
What does that even mean? Wait, it sounds like you were in the bag in the emails. We're trying to be fair to you and give the whole
projection
context.
Is common.
Yeah, but you said in the emails, oh, don't share with anyone. This will make me look like a hack. I didn't say that. You said that.
Yeah, my goal in emailing Podesta to get him to confirm stuff I had from lesser sources. It worked. Nobody controls my stories but me. Troll on. And look, I'm sure that there was an element to it. I mean, the email went on to include what I assume is the vast majority of the actual story. And you could say that it is for confirmation of sources. But if you're going to do that, the way that you intro that email is exactly how you should not do that. And when people are already, in general, outside of the context of this election, extremely distrustful of the media, and inside the context of the election, extremely distrustful specifically of the relationship between the media and the Clinton campaign, this is exactly how you should not be communicating.
Okay, so then let's go even further to the core of this issue, right? The article that Glenn wrote is actually a really interesting article. So fair is fair on that. And it's about the donors and how they're getting access to the Clintons. But in that, it is a dry recounting of the bigger donors versus the smaller donors, the Obama donors versus the Clinton donors, and it is a process article. But at no point does it go, wait a minute, isn't this a bit of a problem?
Yeah.
When we're saying, like one of the phrases used was, do they get to have ownership of the campaign, some of these donors? And they didn't mean that in any like nefarious way. They meant it like, you know,
they?
Yeah, like I want some ownership over this because, you know, I have some ideas that I want to contribute, et cetera. But meanwhile, the rest of us are reading it like, yeah, that's exactly what the problem is. All these different donors have all these different ways of having ownership over the campaign. Yeah. Like Glenn is so buried in that culture. That's why he's comfortable with Podesta, and Podesta's comfortable with him, because no one in that culture questions, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe this is legalized bribery. Maybe these guys do have ownership of our politicians. Maybe that's the real story I should be writing.
Yeah. Yeah, look, Politico from time to time does great work, but the work they do is not intended to disrupt the system. That's just not what it's set up to do.
No, it's
and so
to maintain
this is a demonstration of it.
Absolutely. And so, look, and then when you see, and for me, none of this is personal. You think Republicans don't do the same thing, and the Politico and New York Times doesn't do it with the Republicans? No, if you think that, you are sorely mistaken. This game is played on all sides. They just happen to have John Podesta's emails. Yeah. I'm not protecting him. We've criticized Podesta and Thrush and Haberman, all those guys in this story. At the same time, they're not the boogeyman. They all do it. Yeah. That doesn't excuse it. It's worse. It's systemic. So now there are upsides and downsides of playing this game. We don't play this game. So when Jordan Chariton goes to John Podesta, as he did very, very recently at an event, and tries to ask him a question about these emails, Podesta brushes him off. Because you never ran your stories by me.
Jordan should have pronounced his U's with just U, not with Y-O-U. It's much more comfortable and familiar.
You don't run the stories in the way that we're all comfortable with, a process story on who's buying us.
Yeah.
You say that people are buying us, so you get this, so you get this from the people in power.
I think that the big frustration that you touched on earlier is that while this does happen on both the left and the right, it is highly dependent, not on what your ideas are, it's just dependent on how much power you have. And that's why, yes, I'm sure Donald Trump gets the same deference. We talked about his ability to just call into all these shows, and we know that he's had secret meetings with members of the media. He gets that. Hillary Clinton gets this. Bernie Sanders doesn't get the same sort of deference for his campaign. I'm not saying that he should. It's wrong across the board. But it is frustrating to know that some people are getting advance notice of articles. They're getting positive spin on stories. But if you're not quite as popular, and if maybe you don't support the system in the same way that the media and the regular politicians do, then you're not going to get that from the media. And what effect does that have long term on a campaign? I don't think it has a massive effect in the context of how big a campaign is and how much goes into it. But it's something, and it's frustrating.
And finally, again, another core of the problem is insiders versus outsiders. So that is why the mainstream press, when they see, even to be fair, even including Trump in the primaries, when they see an outsider like Trump or Sanders, they go, no. We don't deal with that guy. That guy is, and they don't think it in terms of like, I am an insider, I don't like outsiders. They don't have that conscious thought. Yeah. But they have this thought of like, Podesta's a guy I deal with, Palmieri's a person I deal with, Trump and Lewandowski, I don't deal with those. Sanders and Jeff Weaver.
Well, now
no.
they've hired Lewandowski.
Yeah, I know. Now, because why? They acquired power.
Yeah, exactly.
And once they won the primary and they acquired power, now they're invited in and they're part of this circle. That is why the press assumed from day one that Hillary Clinton was the right candidate, was going to be the winner of the primaries, and that Bernie Sanders was a nuisance.
Yeah.
And that assumption makes a big, big difference, and they refuse to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
At least if they acknowledged it, we'd be having a different conversation and understanding the upsides and downsides of doing the press in this way.
Yeah.
But when you don't acknowledge it, well, then you just seem like dishonest hacks, if you will.
Yeah.